Hi, and welcome back to Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we've got a star-studded panel here with a whole lot of new stuff to add to that to-be-read pile. Let's see who's bringing in those new releases tonight. So, Joelle, you are up first.
Hi, I'm JD Blackrose, and I write the Summoner's Mark series for Bellbridge Books, as well as other things. And my new release is the one over my shoulder, Wish Magic, which is the fifth installment in the series after three novels and then a novella. And now this starts on another set of three.
David?
Hi, I'm David B. Coe. I also write as D.B. Jackson. I have a new novel from Bellbridge Books as well. This is The Chalice War Cauldron. It's the second book in the series. The third one will be out in early August, and the first one, Stone, came out in May.
Layla?
Hi, I'm Layla. I write a whole bunch of things. My newest release is Painted Love. It was part of the Pride Pet Play series. And I have another release coming out in less than a month. It is Wildfire's Requiem, and it is a Lion Shifter book.
And Stuart?
Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Jaffe. I'm best known for the Max Porter Paranormal Mysteries. But today we're talking about Prime, which is the 13th book in the Nathan K. action thriller fantasy series. And I'm sure we'll get into that plenty.
So let's actually dive a little bit. Let's just sort of talk about the worlds everybody's diving into, because we've got a lot of continuing series going on. So, Ms. Blackrose, would you mind leading us into this particular world and how we've gotten here so far?
Sure. So the first book in the series is called Demon Kissed. It's the red one. That's how you know. It's the red one. They're all colored. So what I tried to establish in that world is that this takes place in a fictional Ohio town on Lake Erie, very much like Cleveland, but not. And it's called Smoky Point, Ohio. And it's a modern day piece with, all the same stuff you would see in any other city. But magic permeates the city, and although not everybody knows about it, there are some people, some regular humans who do, but mostly the paranormal society sort of stays in the background and tries not to make a big deal or make big splashes. And my main character is a summoner. She was born a summoner with a mark on the inside of her left breast that they call a kiss. And she has the ability to summon any kind of, power with a capital P, any kind of power that might be that you can imagine from any kind of pantheon, with no harm to herself. And that's sort of what she does. And she does this typically for clients who are at the end of their rope. So they have, by the time they get to her, they've tried every possible option they can to solve whatever their problem is. And so if you're at the point where you need to summon a demon, so for example, things aren't good. Things are not going well for you. And when we meet her in the very first book, she's now hiding out bartending in a Fey bar because a demon summoning went horribly, horribly wrong. And she fixed it. But now she owes a demon a favor, and she's not sure what he's going to ask, when he's going to ask it, or what he'll do if she says no.
David?
So the Chalice War books are contemporary urban fantasy set in our world, mostly, with a very heavy overlay of Celtic mythology. And the basic premise of the books is that certain ancient treasures that once belonged to the Sidhe remain in our world and are chalices of magic. And as long as they exist in our world, there is magic in our world which protects our world from invasions from the demon underrealm. And so the books, each book is kind of almost like a magical treasure hunt with the apocalypse hanging in the balance. And the first book begins in a kind of what Joelle did. I created a kind of a fictional small exurb in Virginia, but the action actually takes us across the country and ends up in Vegas, because Vegas.
Why not blow up Vegas when you can blow up Vegas?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And my Morrigan, the Battle Furies, are actually Las Vegas nightclub singers when they're not trying to destroy the world. And the second book takes place in Australia, where I lived for a year back in the early 2000s, and involves a search for the Dagda's Cauldron, which is the second of the magical chalices that takes center stage in the series. And my lead characters are forced to, they're attacked by the demons from the Underrealm, and they are forced to rely upon a kind of loose alliance of spirits and Celtic gods, and fun ensues. But it's also, I mean, there's a lot of laughs in this. There's a lot of snark in it, but it's also there's some pretty heavy consequences for things not going well. And then the third book, when it comes out, the Chalice War Sword, is set partially in Ireland and partially in the Demon Underrealm. So at some point I had to create this Underrealm, and that was really fun world building. I really enjoyed doing that. I had to make it into something both that fit the idea of a demon underrealm, but that also kind of defied assumptions and expectations that my readers would have brought to it based on the first two books. It's actually not a bad place to live, as it turns out. And that was kind of fun to write.
Better than Vegas, at least.
I'm sorry?
Better than Vegas, at least.
Yeah, pretty much. Less porn, certainly. But the books have been a tremendous amount of fun to write, and based on people's reactions to them so far, they seem to be pretty fun to read as well. So that's a good thing.
Layla, so you've got a couple.
Well, we just finished releasing all of the books in the Pride Pet Play series. We released them throughout the month of June for Pride Month, and it was a shared world series. So every author could write whatever story they wanted. They just had to include pet play, and they had to include the Pride celebration in some way, shape, or form. And let me tell you, we had some absolutely amazing, we had a koala, we had a dragon, we had people doing kitties. I did a ferret and a kitty. So my Daddy Dom has two pets that he plays with, and they actually march in the Pride Parade and pass out stickers and different things, and have fun with that. But he's also a firefighter, and there's kind of an arsonist working in the city. And so there's this under thread of the arsons and different things that are going on throughout the book as well. So it was just a really fun project to put together, and we're actually getting for June for Pride Month, which is going to be a lot of fun. And my other project, of course, is my Lion Shifters, and that will be out in August, and it will be my first time writing an actual harem book, except it's not traditional harem because I have 5 guys. And they're all lion shifters. Some are very rare. One of them is a white lion. And they have built this new, kind of a new pride that they've put together. And a lot of it is lions that just couldn't fit in where they were at, or they just needed more space, or they wanted to find mates, or they just wanted the freedom to kind of explore life outside of where they'd grown up. And so I'm not going to say it's not a series, but I'm not going to say it is a series yet. We'll see what happens.
Stuart?
The Nathan K series takes place in the contemporary world, and globe hops all over. So it starts off, the very first book is Immortal Killers, and it initially starts off in New York City. Nathan has the ability to have 2 souls. So if he dies, he loses one soul. His main soul kicks in, kind of like a spare tire. It heals him up as if he was brand new, and he can just keep going on. But now, when he's down to one soul, he's mortal again. He ages. He's just a regular guy, and if he dies again, that's it. But as long as he keeps replenishing his second soul, he's essentially immortal. And there are others out there in the world that are like him. And he's starting the first book. He's new to this, and others have been around for centuries. And so they are all very organized. Some of them work for governments. Some of them are private contractors. Some of them have their own agendas that are way beyond any of it. And they're all trying to control him because these immortals are very rare. So when a new one pops up, everybody wants a piece of him. And of course, he doesn't like that. So through 13 books, he's basically trying to get his freedom from them and turn the tables on them. And they go all over the U.S., up into Canada, down into Colombia, South America. They go over to Australia, to Korea, and the final book ends up in Norway. They're very action-packed. They're based on. I basically took the old pulp adventures of the '80s, like Mac Bolan the Executioner and Remo Williams the Destroyer, and all that. Threw in magic and brought it up to contemporary times. So a lot of fun.
So, David, I'm going to start with you on this one. So, character-wise, who are we hanging out with in the series? Yeah, who are we meeting? Who are we hanging out with? Who are we spending time with and getting in their heads?
So, there are essentially four main characters in the series. All four of them women. In the first book, we're introduced to Kelsey Strand and Marty Ryder. Kelsey is, as far as she knows at the beginning of the book, just kind of a normal person. She's in banking. She lives alone. Her mother wants her to get married and have children, and she doesn't want that. It turns out that she is a powerful conduit for she magic. And she meets up with Marty, who has recently lost both her conduit and also the love of her life to a demon attack. And so the two of them wind up becoming bound to each other magically. And they are the main characters in that first book. In the second book, we meet Rhiann Donovan and the woman who becomes her partner, Carrie Pelcher. And Rhiann is she as well, and she has a conduit who's a beautiful Siberian Husky, because I love Siberian Huskies. And Carrie has a secret that I'm not going to share because
it's a secret.
Because it's a secret, yes. But the four of them end up being central to everything that happens in the three books. We don't meet Carrie and Rhiann until the second book, and Kelsey and Marty don't show up until late in the second book, but they're in the first book. And then the four of them are together figuring out stuff in the last book as to how they're going to get back one of the treasures that's already been taken to the Underrealm. And they are, all of them strong, all of them broken in some way, all of them trying to figure out how to overcome their own perceived shortcomings in order to play a role in this magical war that they've been swept up in. And there are times, particularly in the second book, when two or more of them aren't getting along with each other, but they need to find a way to work together and to maintain their relationships and also do what needs to be done to defeat this powerful and determined and very, very dangerous enemy. Joel, does that sound about right? Did I get that about right?
These are great books. I have to say, they're great. So much fun.
So, Layla, who are we going to be hanging out with? And we can pick either one you want to start with.
Well, in Painted Love, you have Cass, and he plays as a ferret, and he's made his first costume. So it's kind of, he's been to like the fabric stores, and he's gotten pieces of fur, and he's patchworked together this ferret suit, and he goes, to an event. He's new in town, and he's just trying to test it out. And, for the most part, very good experience. He does have a few people who kind of look at this patched together suit and kind of, give him the side eye, and somebody makes a comment. But the best part is that he meets these two awesome people. He meets Mouse, whose real name is Noah, but Mouse plays as a kitty, but likes to be called Mouse. And they meet. Cass meets Mouse's daddy, Daddy G, who is a fireman, and who kind of wants to show Cass, kind of lets him play with Mouse, and they play in this little maze, and they're running around chasing after these little dangly toys, and he just kind of like makes it a fun thing for Cass. And then later, they put the numbers in the phones, and Cass and Mouse really start to connect. Mouse is a writer, and with Cass being an artist, you've got these two creatives who have all this time on their hands where they're creating and they're not really spending time with other people. So they start bonding over the things that they like to create. And that is really what starts pulling Cass into kind of the relationship with the two of them, is that he is this missing piece between them. And you really just get to see them have fun. Like, I usually write these angsty stories, and this was just so much fun because there's just so much playtime, and there's time on the beach, and they've got bubbles, and they've got frisbees, and they've got glitter, and they've got all this cool stuff going on, and they're like painting little characters as murals, and they're storytelling together where they start talking about maybe doing a graphic novel, and it's actually just something that's sweet and fun and not angsty.
What happens when you put writers together with artists? Yeah. So, Stuart, how about you?
In the Nathan K series, there's obviously Nathan. And in the second book, we get introduced to Robin, who is this brilliant hacker, African-American lesbian woman who basically they end up teaming up together because of she hires him originally and then stays with him ever since. And has become a fan favorite to the point that I have people ask me to write a spin-off series that's just her. And she's initially kind of the what they call it, the guy in the chair, just on the earpiece doing all the computer stuff. But she quickly keeps inserting herself into Nathan's life and into that, getting oftentimes too close to the action and getting herself in trouble. And then Nathan is Nathan, and he's really doesn't have his life very much together. And then, of course, he discovers he's got this immortality thing, which is a blessing and a curse. He has a lot of not angst, but a tug of war within himself over the morality of what he does. Because I mentioned in the beginning that the only way to be immortal is to have a second soul, and if you lose it, which happens to him a lot because people are trying to control him and hunt him down, you have to get one. You have to get another soul, and they don't grow on trees. You got to go take one. So he tries to be. He's found his moral line with that, and so he'll go to hospices and places where people are pretty much on their last legs anyway, and tries to take those lives. But there are certainly other immortals who have no qualms killing anybody they need to if they need a soul right then and there. And then so they're the two. They're really just it. There's no large found family. It's just the two of them against the world. But one of the other really interesting characters that is introduced in the very first book is this guy named the Cardinal, and he is what's called a prime. One thing about being an immortal is that, yes, you have two souls, but having a soul is not what makes you an immortal. The immortality, as far as anybody's figured out so far, is it has to do with the physical body that your soul inhabits. Something is very special about that, which means that if you bring in the wrong soul to be your second soul, it could take over and kick you out. And that happens quite a lot. So as a result, there are these extremely rare immortals. In fact, we've only ever met the Cardinal and one other who are primes, who have never lost. They were the very first soul in that body and have never left. And so the Cardinal was an actual cardinal back in like the 1400s, and he's still around. And the primes, having been in this for so long, have discovered a lot more that they can do besides just have a second soul. In fact, the Cardinal has about 12 souls within him that anybody's ever seen. And it's also made him very removed from humanity and the world. He's very hard to comprehend. Just having a conversation with him, he's just off. He's like an alien species, but he's always trying to do something. He's got an agenda, which I'm not going to tell you, of course, because it took 13 books to get to the book called Prime. It's clearly about him, and so they're the primes. Again, we only ever meet two of them so far, but they are some of my favorites to play with because they break a lot of the rules, which usually you can't do. Like usually we all as writers know we set up a magic, the rules of the magic in this world, and those are the rules we play by. And I managed to create a character who within those rules gets to break all the rules, and leave you wondering without using it as like, I don't use it as a deus ex machina or anything like that, but it's a lot of fun. It's a tightrope to walk, but it's fun.
Joelle, who are we getting to hang out with through this series?
Well, I mean, there's the main character, Rebecca Greenblatt, who everyone calls Bex, and then there's another. There's a couple of main characters. It is a found family, and there's another character named Asher, who has in the first book some pretty important secrets, and then there's a really important character named Gregory Adamos, and Gregory is a sort of Greek heritage mobster with ties to Greek mafia, and he owns this sort of Midwest territory, and he's a real morally gray character. And there are a number of times when he's a complete jerk, and then every once in a while he does something somewhat redeeming. But he grew on me, and I didn't, sometimes as writers, we start a character and we don't really know where they're going to go. And he was almost like just he was there as a foil for Asher originally, but then he just sort of grew on me. And in this book, in Wish Magic, he's a plain old vanilla mortal who exists in this magical world and knows about it, and really knows a lot. He knows a lot of details. He's been places that mortals don't usually go. He's been involved with Bex for, since actually the very, very beginning. And as a result, he's starting to feel a little insecure, which is not a good feeling for him. He's always in control. And there's a novella right before this called Samhain's Bargain, but it's spelled the Celtic way, Samhain, Samhain's Bargain, which takes place over Halloween. And Gregory is literally directly attacked by Lucifer for reasons. Lucifer. And so in this book, at the end of that book, he's decided he needs to protect himself more. He needs magic of his own. And in Wish Magic, he gets it, but it doesn't go the way he expects. He definitely gets more than he's bargained for, and chaos ensues. And Bex once again has to put it to right, but she puts it to right with a whole bunch of other characters. And one of the most important characters in the entire series is a 6-foot-tall pink fairy named Pinky, who is a really sweet young man, and he's got a very distinct personality, and he's very kind, and he's super smart, but he can't stand crowds, and he's got like this really super sensitive sense of smell, so he can't. It's hard for him to be around people, and she sort of takes on a very protective role for Pinky, and he takes everything everyone says completely literally. So in the first book, he surprises her. He comes up behind her and he surprises her, and she says, "Ugh, next time whistle, will you?" And later on in the book, he whisks. She hears this whistle, and she's like, "Oh, Pinky took me, at my word." So he in this book plays a really, really important role, and he's the character that I absolutely could not ever really harm, because people might revolt. So he's a very, very important character, and he and Gregory are very much involved in this last book. So
one of the fun things when you're working on and crafting these worlds, and I mean, we're talking about a lot of complex, developed worlds here. And Layla, I'm gonna pick on you for this one first. What inspired the world you were in? That you decided to pursue this with.
I loved the idea. When I was invited into the Shared World project, I loved the idea because, first off, being a writer myself, it's like it was really easy to, picture Mouse and him being at home, but it's easy to picture Cass too. I have a lot of artist friends. I do a lot of artwork, and I just wanted to, I do so much fantasy. I wanted to do something that was just so cozy and basic and real, where I could just take these guys who are living everyday, lives creating, and bring them together and do something fun with it. So really it was just hearing about the Shared World project and being like, oh, I get to write pet play, which I've fallen in love with doing. This is my second pet play book. And I get to include Pride in it, which is always just, I've loved going to as many celebrations as I can. So taking things that I love and getting to bring them together in a book. And in this one where I didn't have to figure out the rules of wolf shifters, or how a group of lions comes together, or what to do with my snake men. It was a nice little break from all my paranormal.
So Stuart, what about you? What really inspired this series, the rules, everything you've built around it so far, since it's taken you this long just to get around to the Cardinal?
Well, it came out of a couple things. One, I already said, I always had a love for the kind of pulpy stuff that, I grew up with, and just wanted to find a way to incorporate that into the fantasy stuff that I like, that I also love. But also, the Max Porter Paranormal Mysteries, that's my best-selling series. That's I write one or two of those books a year. They require a lot of research. They're very complicated, and I write several different series every year so that I don't get stale with just one thing. So I needed at the time, going back a bunch of years, I wanted something very different that didn't require any research like that I could just kind of let my brain have fun and just complete playground with a whole different set of rules. And the thing about those pulp adventures too is they're very a plot driven. Some of them don't even have subplots. They're just, here's what the mission is, we're going for it, and it's very lean, just straightforward. Lots of action, lots of explosions. And so that's very far removed from what Max Porter is, which is, again, paranormal mysteries, a lot of spooky houses and going around and dealing with ghosts and witches. So it really just came out of that, wanting a palate cleanser, so I could, and then it took on a life of its own. And as characters do, they start to develop and grow, and it slowly became this fully realized world that I really enjoy playing in, and thankfully a lot of other people enjoy reading about. So,
Joelle,
What drove it?
yeah, what brought this world into fruition?
Well, this world was a little bit of I sort of had to come up with it really fast. So when I was talking to the publisher at Bellbridge Books, one day we were at a convention together, and we were both on the same panel. I was moderating, and she got there early, and I was already sitting there. And she sat down. She said, "Joelle, I really like your voice. You know, the way my writing voice." She said, "What are you working on?" And this is like the moment, right? Every writer dreams of this moment, because this is the moment when you're supposed to pitch. You're going to have your main idea and then two more as a backup, have three things that you can pitch. And I had nothing. I mean, nothing, zero, zilch, nothing. I utterly failed. So I looked at her and I said, "Well, what are you looking for?" Because that's the best I could come up with. And she said, "I'm looking for a gritty urban fantasy." And I said, "I can write that." And she said, "Okay, send me something." So I had to follow up on this. I had a limited amount of time. And, you have to strike while the iron's hot, right? So I went back. I was staying with a friend, and I went back to his house after this, and I started looking through my phone where I keep notes just of funny things I overhear in the parking lot of the grocery store, or things that I've said that people might have laughed at, or just ideas that come to me. And everything starts with me at character. Always, it starts with me at character. I have to know the people before I can figure out what they're doing. And I saw a thing that I had written in my phone from a time when I had at that time I was working full time, and my team and I had ordered Chinese food, and I got my fortune cookie, and I opened it up, and it said, "No one looks good in skinny jeans." And I was wearing skinny jeans at the time. So I turned to my colleague and I said, "I think I was just fat shamed by a fortune cookie." And he burst out laughing. So I wrote it down. I thought I was fat shamed by a fortune cookie is a good line. And so I found that, and I wrote, "I was fat shamed by a fortune cookie." And the next line was, "Did you eat it and show it who's boss?" And when I did that, I was like, "Oh, this is my main character. This is my main character's sister," says the first line, and my main character says the second line. And then it sort of started to work from there, because that gave me the toehold that I needed to start thinking about who these people were, and where were they, and what were they doing, and why were these two sisters talking? And I had my main character in a car, and suddenly she was in a car chase with somebody chasing her, and why were they chasing her? And I had this whole thing. So it developed very fast once I had that those first two lines.
David?
I'll say also, Bex is a wonderful character, and I'm pretty sure I blurbed that first book.
You did.
Yeah. This is a great series. You need to read it.
The only thing I wish is I didn't have an orange hat in that series.
That is true. Wait, just little side note. There are three little tiny wee elves, and they are named after three friends. And Jim is indeed one of them. And he does have an orange hat. I'm sorry. If I had known that was going to offend you, I would have changed the color.
Sorry, David.
No, it's quite all right. So this book grew out of an early low point in my career. I had finished writing my third epic fantasy series for Tor, spanning 11 books. Not that third series, but all the books that I'd written to that point for Tor. And for the last series, I had done a tremendous amount of reading in mythology during the world building phase of the series. And I had read Greek mythology. I had done that once years ago, but I went back and read Edith Hamilton's mythology book, which is brilliant, and spent some time with that. And I read a bunch of Celtic mythology. I read Iberian mythology, which was really fun, kind of folk tales, and Norse mythology, all this stuff. And I used some of it in creating the world as kind of inspiration for the world I created for those epic fantasies. And at the time, I was done with the epic fantasies, and I had pitched through my agent what would become the Thief Taker series, which is probably the thing I'm best known for. I write it as D.B. Jackson. It's a historical urban fantasy series set in pre-revolutionary Boston. And we were waiting on Tor to bid on it or not. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And I had nothing to do. And Tor was dragging its feet. And it was in the middle of the summer. And I just thought, I have all this mythology still circulating in my head. I've been thinking about it for literally years after writing all these fantasy books, stuff that I didn't use. And the Celtic mythology was the stuff that really sang to me, even though I didn't end up using it for the world. It didn't fit. But that was the stuff that sang to me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write an urban fantasy, but I'm going to do all this Celtic mythology stuff with it. And kind of like what Stuart described, I just started writing. I didn't worry about whether it was marketable. I didn't worry about how we were going to sell it. I started writing it because I wanted to have fun and I wanted to do something different. It was almost like a palate cleanser after all these multi-strand, heavy-duty, chihuahua-killing fantasy novels I had written. And the book flew. I mean, I finished it I think I wrote the entire book, that iteration of it, in 2 months. And it is the book that became the Chalice War Stone. It wasn't called that at the time, and the book has been through a couple of iterations where I've edited it and redone it and rejiggered certain things and gotten it to work better than it did. But that was the book. And it introduced me to this Celtic world that I then wanted to keep on playing in. That was back in 2000, the summer of 2010. So that was a full 13 years before these books found the light of day. And I started the second book in like 2016, because again, I had reached a point in my career where I was waiting on a publisher. I had nothing to do. Let's start book 2. And so my publisher is also Bell Bridge, and Deb Dixon, who is brilliant and just wonderful. I had finished working on the Radiance books, and she asked me, what else do you have? I said, well, actually, I have this old Celtic themed urban fantasy, which is as far as I got, because she just went, yes, please. And that's how the series was born, and that's how the series found a home.
With kind of all the mythology, all the different moving pieces we've got here, I mean, one of the favorite parts of being a writer, right, is getting out there and doing research. It's tripping over the research rabbit holes. It's let me go see what I could, sometimes it's learning about process. Sometimes it is just the odd little fact you trip down. So Stuart, I'm going to throw this to you. What's the one thing that you sort of learned or discovered or tripped down the rabbit hole working on this project?
Well, like I said, this was actually my anti-research project. So I didn't, because again, for a Max Porter novel, I will spend at least a month or more doing research, and it takes place where I live in North Carolina. So I will drive to locations and look at them and all of that. Nathan Kay goes all over the world, so which I can't afford to go do. So I learned that Google Earth can really get you down not only to street level, but in a lot of cases you can actually go into buildings. Like, if there's a business, a quick click and you're suddenly in an Irish pub in Ireland. And so that made it great for the same reason, actually, for a Max Porter book, that actually going to a place makes a difference, because you see things you wouldn't populate in your mind if you're just making it from a blank canvas. So I used a lot of that, and I also just drew on places I traveled to. The books that I think there's book. I think it's just one book that is a whole big adventure that takes place in South Korea, where I'd spent a couple weeks of my life, and so I was just drawing on those experiences for the world building. The rest of it just comes out of my head, and that's the beauty of it for me, is I don't have to really go into much research for that. With one caveat, I do have to research my guns. In this series, it's important that he's immortal, and all of them are, and so they're around long enough to actually learn how to fight. Which I was a second degree black belt, so I do know how to hand, but I had to learn about shooting and all that weapons. So I do have to do some research, but it's pretty minor and fun research for me.
Joelle?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question, because wrong finger. No, I can't do this. That one. But this book, I had to do a lot of research into genie mythology, and that the jinn came from Arabic stories, Arabic folk tales, and Arabic mythology, and it's such a rich tradition, and there's so much. And so I had been reading, and then I read one article that was really great, and I reached out to the professor who wrote it, who's at the University of Toronto, and I can't say enough about him. He was so nice, and he just greeted me like an old friend. And I just emailed him and said, like, hey, I'm writing this book. Do you have a few minutes? Like, can I just ask you a few questions? I promise I won't take much of your time. And then he scheduled a Zoom, and we were on for like an hour. So that was great. And it's really important, because these stories, these jinn stories, and the beliefs and the relationship to, there's so many things about it, but this comes from a culture that is not mine. And so I wanted it to be very, very respectful of that culture. Still play with it, of course, but I didn't want to do anything that looked careless or stupid. Like, you can play with the culture's mythology, but you need to try really hard not to be completely insulting. So it was really great to have this professor to help me, and he even translated some things, and he's acknowledged in the book, because I really couldn't have done it without him. So yeah, so that was a big thing, is to sink into this Arabic mythology and folklore around jinn, where they come from, why they exist. Are they all bad? Are they all good? Because I didn't want to be, blue Aladdin genie. This needed to be something else. So.
David, especially since you were diving into lots of past research.
Yeah. So part of what I learned is never throw away your travel journals, because, as I say, I set stuff in Australia, where we lived for a year. I set stuff in Vegas, where we spent time with our kids, including a couple of the hotels that are mentioned in the book. A set part of a book in Ireland where we traveled a few years ago. We still haven't been to the Underrealm, but we're hoping to get there when it's not all touristy.
It's really hot right now.
Right? Yeah. It isn't everywhere. So that was one thing.
October is a lovely time of year.
The other thing that I learned from the research, and it was really fascinating because you read about the old Celtic mythology, and so much of it is focused on she versus Fomorian and kind of the wars that were fought among them. But you start looking into the variety of creatures, of demons, of spirits, of gods that inhabit Celtic myth. And it is just stunning, the amount of the menagerie that you find in those stories, and in the powers that various gods or people or warriors or demons are endowed with. And it was so much fun. I didn't even begin to mine all that there is to mine. And I did a lot of stuff in the books, and there's so much more I can do. And I'm hoping to go back and do more of it. But that really was what struck me the most, was the variety that I found when I dove into Celtic myth and just all that they had to offer.
Layla, what research rabbit hole did you trip over?
The nice thing is this was kind of my anti-research book too. I had just come off of researching all this stuff on trafficking, human trafficking, because in my wolf shifters, they traffic the exotic shifters, and it's a huge trade, and it was a big part of like 3 of the books. So, getting to write this, I got to kind of pull up my pictures and memories of being out in Seattle. So the club that the book starts in is actually based off of a place that I spent a lot of time in when I was out in Seattle, and the folks that are kind of populating the club and the story. I got to pull on all my cool experiences out there. I had hooked up years back with a friend who was going for Seattle Woman of Leather, and I was part of her, kind of her attendant for this event and being backstage for all these things. And so those are the things I got to pull into the story. And, I got to pull in the times I've spent with some of the street musicians I've hung out with and the street artists, because Cass is doing murals. He's not doing fine art. He's doing, street style characters and little, glyphs. And we just had a painter do a huge mural down by our river. And I'd spent hours chatting with him and hanging out down there. And so Cass is doing a mural for the aquarium. And so I just got to pull on fun things that I'd gotten to do that were kind of sitting around and kicking around in my brain. And this story came together in less than a month's time. It was one of those where you sit down, you write and you write till you can't hold the pen anymore, because it was just flying on the page so fast. Like the characters had come alive just from all the adventures I'd had. Everybody was just talking, and the first draft of it just flew onto the paper, and it was so much fun to do because I didn't have to pause and be like, oh, like what might he paint? It's like, no, I pulled my pictures from the aquarium in Australia because I was just out there for rare, and I was like, this is the exact creature. He's drawing this, and this is the colors, and this is what he's doing, and this is the mural that we're doing. And it was just so much fun to just draw on experiences.
But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys, and of course, find all these new releases. So, Joelle?
Yeah, so you can find me at my website at slipperywords.com, and you can find this book wherever, all the normal places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, iBooks, whatever. And it comes out July 28th. It's up for pre-order now. And in August 1st through the 15th. The first book in the series will be on sale for 99 cents. So if you want to start there, you can.
David?
You can find everything David B. Co. at davidbco.com. You can find links to the books and sample chapters of the books. And the third book will be out on August 4th. The first two books are already available and are available wherever fine books are sold. And yeah, I hope you'll check them out.
Layla?
You can find me at Layla Dorine 13 at Wix.com, on Instagram and Facebook and pretty much any social media platform. Wildfire's Requiem will come out August 11th. It is up for pre-order now. And Painted Love came out in June, so it is readily available on Amazon, and it is in KU. There's links there to the whole rest of the series. And if you drop in on my website, you will find bits and blurbs from not only the current books that are out, but the books that are coming.
Stuart?
I know this is going to shock y'all, but you can find me at stuartjaffe.com. And the Nathan K book is out already everywhere you can get a book. If you're new to the series, you can start with the first one. It's called Immortal Killers, and the ebook for it everywhere is free, so you can just grab it. And on my website, if you sign up for my mailing list, you'll get the first two books of this series for free as well. So lots of great ways to try out my writing without even having to pay for it.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host tonight, Jim Nettles, and you can find me at jamesbnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the Speculative Fiction Academy.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And go stack up those to-be-read piles. We'll see you again soon.